Well,
No.
Tom Scott reminds me that I'm going to have to mention that I am not sponsored by Iron Brew because of YouTube legal.
Anyway, this podcast is sponsored by.
This YouTube channel is not sponsored by anyone. In fact, my only sponsors in my career are my lovely, who are Helen Looker and Stuart Wildig. Two fine people.
Michael, what
Yes.
is the name of your blog here?
Oh,
And where can people find it?
yes. And if you want to read the blog, where you can see all of the Hartnell thoughts, Glasgow and surrounding beasties, and a link will be in the description below.
Absolutely. For a self-professed grumpy Glaswegian, Michael is surprisingly sociable.
This is Michael's YouTube channel, which apparently should have more stuff on it. So here we have a look at the Hartnell era, which I have been marathoning very slowly since the first lockdown happened, which is nearly as long as it took the Hartnell era to actually be broadcast. Instead of going for the stereotype YouTube way of going for one of those rate things, I thought, let's forget that. Let's get Jon Arnold on to argue against all of my views.
Hello.
Jon, how are you?
I'm very well indeed. I have not marathoned at the same pace. I last watched the Hartnells in the early days of lockdown because Eddie, my son, insisted that he wanted to see all of Doctor Who during lockdown. And we managed that inside, I think, 3 months.
This makes me look amateur. Mind you, I have written 160,000 words. 3 seasons of Doctor Who, which is far too many.
No, it's not enough.
Yes.
I can do, look, I can do 25,000 on one story, as is well known.
Like if Obscure were ever that desperate to actually do them in Facebook by me, it might actually come out in volumes like Game of Thrones.
I am encouraging Michael here. It is one of my favourite eras.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, probably up there, certainly with the 20th century, with the McCoy era as an absolute pinnacle of what the show could do for me.
I mean, I always knew that I liked the series, the Hartnell episodes, because I'd watched all of them over a period of going on 30 years of being a fan now, but I'd never actually sat down and watched them all broadcast order before. So this was a new experience, and it gave me a better appreciation for many of them, which I didn't had before.
I mean, the weird thing is when Eddie wanted to do the watch through on lockdown, he wanted to do it in reverse. So what that really gives you an idea of is how genuinely odd, even by Doctor Who standards, those early Hartnell days are. You know, you see the show in the politest way shrinking. You know, everything falling away. You know, Gallifrey's gone, the Time Lords are gone, and you just end up with an old man, a box, and a girl, essentially.
Yes. First up, companions of the Hartnell era, best and worst.
I mean, the thing is, you do have some companions, or if you count the companions, who are very, very short term. So, you know, you have to say, you know, Katarina there for 2 stories and 5 episodes. We hardly knew you. Goodbye.
Well, that's the point. Katarina count as a companion.
She travels in the TARDIS. She's in 2 stories. It's Doctor Who. It's all grey area. You cannot draw lines around the show.
Because if she does, then she has to go on the worst pile, I'm afraid.
Absolutely. I have to agree. You know, she's barely in it, and you know, she goes. She does have a memorable exit at least.
Which she filmed before she filmed any of her actual other scenes.
Yeah, which is a hell of a way to make your debut, isn't it?
Hi, join the crew. Here's your death scene.
Now the best way is far more difficult because you know your obvious pair are Ian and Barbara here because they are basically the focus of the show for the first 2 years. It's you know, it should be called the Ian and Barbara show, not really Doctor Who. But I always want to put in a big word for Stephen Taylor, because
Mm,
he comes in, he has the hardest job in the world. He has to basically replace Jackie Lane and William Russell,
yes.
and he does it. And he is in the original series one of the very few companions who carries his own story. So I've got to put in word for Stephen on this.
Yes. Plus, I mean, Peter Purvis has the worst hand that any of the classic companions get coming into the show. He's got to replace two of the most popular characters who started the show. And then not only is he in it, but he's got to deal with the fact that the leading man is sadly, his health is declining, and suddenly Stephen has to carry a lot of the show. The massacre, quite a lot of parts of the Savages too, and I think he just knocks it straight out of the park, really. I think it's one of the most underrated companions in the whole show.
Absolutely. Again, it's almost like where the new series went back to the Hartnell and started. It's almost like a joint lead, a co-lead. And again, you can also say, I think there's something like the Celestial Toymaker.
Yes.
For all of its flaws, he does nearly make it work.
It's bad, but can you imagine it without Peter Purvis?
Oh,
As an actor, he has to do the really serious, the massacres are like as serious as you can get in Doctor Who. And
yeah.
then a few weeks later, he's the comic foil and the gunfighter. And
this is why you need, the companions need to be good acting, Doctor, because you can get, particularly in these early years, you can get anything chucked at you from week to week. You can get ants versus butterflies on an alien planet, to messing around in Rome, a fart in Rome, a carry on essentially.
and speaking of Rome and Stephen, in fact, um, is it controversial of me to say that he is better than Susan?
No,
Mm,
I don't think so. I don't think they know what to do with Susan through that first season. It's she's very much written as this very kind of almost stereotypical 60s. Her role is to get into trouble and
yes.
and be rescued. There's not much agency. There's not much of Carol Ann Ford to play, to be fair there.
Introduced as an unearthly child, and then they forget she's an unearthly child for most of her time.
Yeah, there's a few lines in the Sensorites. That's it, I think.
She gets to actually do something in the Sensorites for 2 episodes, and then they get bored.
I mean, even her exit isn't her own choice.
Yes.
There is no agency to her whatsoever.
I always felt it quite bad that they brought her back in the Five Doctors,
Yeah.
and one of the first things she does is fall over and sprain her ankle. That just felt cruel.
That felt like Uncle Terry having a joke.
On the flip, when they replaced her with Vicky, I know Maureen O'Brien had trouble adapting to the role thanks to our press, and she exited the show in let's say unfair John Wiles circumstances.
Yes,
Uh,
gets better material,
hmm.
than to particularly something like the Space Museum, where she actually incites the revolution. Always just a scouser to question authority.
Quite notable that within the first 6 episodes of Vicky replacing Susan, they've had her survive against a deranged serial killer,
Yes,
befriend a sand monster, and try and poison one of the most notorious dictators in history.
it's like it's just better writing of the companion, I think, for a lot of it. I think Maureen O'Brien is probably a better actress than Carol Ann Ford for a lead role.
Yeah, Hartnell and Maureen O'Brien seem to have better team chemistry.
Yes, and it helps. I think that what's it? The Romans is the second adventure they were in, and they
Yes,
go off together, and that
yes.
that really does seal it. It's a really nice split of the TARDIS crew, and
Hmm.
it's perfect. That division.
We don't really get Vicky and Stephen that long in the show. Only about 13 episodes.
Yeah, it's the last episode of the
Hmm.
chase.
Yes,
For
plus
8.
Time Meddler and Galaxy 4, and they're not in Mission to the Unknown.
Minus Mission to the Unknown, yes.
Uh-huh.
They really spark, particularly if they got the scene together they have in the Time Monster. They're wonderful. That is a really nice TARDIS group. I love the opening of the Time Monster, where Stephen stumbles in. That's a monitor, that's a toy panda.
Yes.
Sheer poetry, dear boy. I love that scene. It's gorgeous.
You got to trust people with toy pandas about. I was really happy when we got Galaxy 4. Well, one episode of it back, and it showed how well that team worked together. And it also showed how great Derek Martinez is. And that's not the last time I'll mention how great he is in this podcast.
Absolutely. The old Hartnells, we tend to have to judge it off the soundtracks, and maybe it's a little easier with the Hartnells because you don't quite have what Troughton does. Troughton is always trying something physical, climbing away, whereas Hartnell is going to give more straightforward performance. But some of those moments, it's the monologue that Mark gives in that episode.
Mm-hmm.
Gorgeously shot. It's almost just a close up on Stephanie Bidmead, and it's something that fandom never ever even knew really, or never talked about.
Yeah.
Because the people who talked about, were maybe they were kids at the time, 6, 7 to maybe 13, 14. And that's not the kind of thing that excites you, but it's the kind of thing that really sells the drama of it.
Yes.
And Galaxy 4 does need to have the drama sold a lot because it's a big story. It was for years there wasn't even a photo of Galaxy 4. You had
the Rills.
The Rills, yeah. I think it was was it in the 60s, the How Stamps Walker thing, and it was the first time I've seen a Rill. It's like, my God, it's a Rill.
Yes.
Kids today, they think you're an idiot when you think that sort of thing.
The late Jackie Lane and Dodo, on the basis that she does not get good material to work with for most of her stay. She mostly has to play Captain Gullible and have the idiot lantern to walk around doing the silly things for the plot advances. And the worst bit about it is, in the few episodes they actually give her something to do, which is basically the gunfighters in one episode of the War Machines. Jackie Lane's actually really good in that role as a proactive companion. So they could have done more with her, but they just screwed it all up.
Oh, absolutely. The stuff in the salon, and the way she handles Doc Holliday and the gunfighters, it's again absolutely brilliant. It's brilliant acting as well, because Jackie Lane sells it as much as anything. More I argue than half, because I believe that they were told by Innes Lloyd and Jerry Davies to go over the top on it, and Jackie Lloyd doesn't go over the top, which she plays it absolutely right, slightly heightened, but not too far over the top.
That scene where Dodo turns the tables on Doc Holliday with a gun, and Doc Holliday lets her win. It's one of my favourite scenes in the Hartnell era. And I just wish they'd let her have that role throughout the series, because that's just a snippet of potential.
Absolutely. And there's my colleague James Curry Smith points out in his Black Archive on the Massacre, Dodo is the first working class companion. Her accent does go all over the place, but it's not an RP as the others have been.
Mm-hmm.
So she is kind of important. It's kind of does pave the way for the future, even for Polly and Ben.
I do like Ben and Polly in their introduction in the War Machines, because episode 2, Michael Craze is already getting a cliffhanger to himself, and it feels earned because he's kind of earnestly worked his way into the show. It's this well-meaning, but not the brightest sailor. Plus, his love for his newfound girlfriend just shines through the entire. He's very fond of Polly.
He is as loyal as they come.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of good material there for Michael Craze to work with. And
where would the show be without William Russell and Jackie Hill?
Absolutely nowhere. Just you couldn't have cast those roles better. Just perfect. Ian is a fairly kind of maybe a kind of bland figure, but William Russell again, always quite clever. He's always got an eye on the comedy. He's always got on a little bit of business going on, having fun with it, role, right up to the end. Say, let's go dancing to the Beatles in the chase so badly. I just adore that. Yeah. I mean, you're talking, these two are essentially the humans. They're our viewpoint. They are the audience identification characters. Vicky and Stephen are both from the future. You don't get that back till, well, I suppose a bit of Dodo, but mainly with Ben and Polly.
It's Ben and Polly always trying to find 1966.
Yes.
And people would assume it's because Ben has to get to his barracks as a sailor. But we all know it's because he's got tickets to see England in the World Cup final.
And he's had a little pop when he's been in the future and had a look and
put a sly bet on it.
Right. Yeah, extra time. Yeah, Jeff first hat trick. Got it.
Well, the Doctor disappears overnight at the end of the War Machines, and I'm half convinced that he just popped down to watch Paktovic knock Italy out the World Cup. That was on the same day. Where's the logic? Much logic is the Celestial Toy Maker. I believe before we go into the ranking all 29. Yes, I realised later on that I'd actually forgotten the Dalek invasion of Earth and had to start again.
Oops.
All the stories to forget. I've ranked them all using what is known as the Clopile method, where you mark out of 10 for character, atmosphere, the writing, the plot, the intrigue, the overall intrigue, the story logic, and your overall enjoyment.
So that's 70 then.
Yeah, so it's a mark out of 70. And to be honest, if you want a passing grade, only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stories got below 35 out of 70.
Pretty good ratio. And I have slightly different views to Michael on some of these stories, as we'll come to.
Yes, I'm expecting to utterly horrify Mr. Arnold here, who has been victim to many of my many thoughts on Doctor Who over the many decades.
I wouldn't call it victimhood.
Well, sometimes you wake up at 4 a.m. and you have to tell someone your views on the Ambassadors of Death. It's just
quite right.
John, put you on the spot. What would you say were your 5? What would you say were the 5 best Hartnell stories?
At number 5, because everyone knows it's true, and fandom and particularly Jeremy Bentham was wrong, I had the Gunfighters.
Yay!
Which is one of the finest Doctor Who stories ever told, and you will never convince me otherwise. It is genuinely funny. The Ballad of the Last Chance Saloon, despite my wife absolutely despising it, really works well as a kind of as this commentary on the action. And maybe I think maybe it falls down a little when it suddenly goes from the comedy to straight to the film sequences. That maybe kind of just marks it out in my top 3 or 4 a little bit, but it really does work. It's something that whose reputation has improved over the years, and you can see once people actually are able to watch it, it's better than Reputation.
I do feel a bit bad for Jeremy Bentham, the Doctor Appreciation Society dude, now, because I feel like he must have sat through 40 years of fans quoting his review so they can disagree with him.
Well, anyone whose line is from the ridiculous to the line about the savages, God bless the savages, but I wouldn't quite go that far on it.
I mean, he does say it's basically West Ham and, 1966 West Ham World Cup.
Number 4, essentially the same story, but a couple of thousand years earlier. The Myth Makers.
Yes.
Which is genuinely clever, and possibly here because I have an absolute love for the Target book of it, which I got when it came out, and maybe went above my head when I was 10 or 11. You come back to it when you're 16, 17, 18, and you're going, damn it, this is just as good a Doctor Who book as there has been.
I do genuinely need to reread the Target novel as an adult because I couldn't get into it when I last read it, and when I last read it, I was 8.
Yes, it's not a children's novel. He is trying to undercut, myths in both in the Gunfighters and the Mythmakers. The Gunfighters undercutting the modern myths because it's the myths of the Wild West are what happened when Wyatt Earp was hanging around the early Hollywood sound stages and giving them advice on what happened. Funny enough, who's the big hero?
Yes, I do find it quite ironic that the Gunfighters is set 80 years before it was filmed, and the Mythmakers, well, Troy was what, several hundred years BC, and yet we know even less of what actually happened during the Gunfighters in real life than we do about what happened during ancient Greece.
Yeah, Homer was kind of a little more reliable, I think, than Hollywood. Number 3, and it's one of those that I sometimes have at number 1. These are your top 3 going anywhere. The Romans.
Oh, yeah.
Again, you can see this. I like a historical comedy.
Yes,
I'm big on that, and I think a lot of this is for all the fact that when you'd have been watching at the time, if you're a kid, the exciting thing is the science fiction stuff.
Mm.
But the stuff that's aged better is the historical stuff, because you get all the character actors.
yes.
You say Derek Francis, I think, is Nero.
Yes,
Beautiful performance there. I like Tigellinus as well in this.
yes.
Not a word, but the business is so. And you get episode 3, which I think was Inferno, which I think was broadcast on the day of Winston Churchill's state funeral.
Oh, really?
Which is a complete farce. Brilliant. Just what the nation needs after a bit of misery. Yeah, my number 2, the theme goes, and this will probably surprise you all, but this was how it ranked. The Keys of Marinus.
Really?
It's Doctor Who in miniature. I know it's hugely ambitious. You put in 5 different environments on in 6 weeks, but it's basically Doctor Who miniature. They go from place to place, solve a problem. So it's a cynic dosh for the entire show, and it's just something I just find like comforting. And hang on, I see. I have a board to hand.
It's somewhere in the top 29.
The number 1, the Time Meddler. The Time, which again it reformats it. It merges the 2 strands of Doctor Who. That little, you've got a science fiction strand to come in with the historical strand.
Yeah.
And you've got Peter Butterworth being Peter Butterworth. Yeah, as a villain. You've got lovely moments like the gramophone in the monastery as a cliffhanger, and then again, and I know we're going to talk about cliffhangers later, but spoil it. That 3rd episode cliffhanger, it's the TARDIS. The monk's got a TARDIS.
Yes.
How mind blowing was that in 1965? You go,
it changes.
What the hell's going on?
I mean, it does. It changes the entire show from then on. Peter Butterworth was so popular in the role, they actually brought him back, which they never did in those days.
No, I think is he the only one who comes back apart from the Daleks?
He is the first non-Dalek to return.
There you go. Whereas now, if we were doing the Hartnell farewell today, there'd be the tour of all the historical sites. Hi, Marco. See you, Ortlock.
And that would have been no, actually, it wouldn't have been useful because we'd have it. So we don't have the 10th Planet Part 4.
No, we don't.
No.
'29's a good place to start.
Yes, the bottom of the list, and I don't think anyone who has followed this marathon will be surprised here, because this is the story which actually made me pause for nearly 6 months because I couldn't get through it. Yes, Bottom place, 29th place, it is the Celestial Toymaker.
And it takes a hell of an effort to make a story of Michael Goff get that low.
Yes. They barely give him anything to do in it, though. It's mostly long periods of watching Jackie Lane and poor old Peter Purvis do various games that you can't see, and when you can see them, they're not that much more interesting.
It's the bits there are some interesting bits. I'm sure at the start with the the toy maker showing Dodo her family at home. That sounds like an interesting bit to do. There is some dramatic mileage in that, but the rest of it is just it's almost it's almost like the way Terrence Stitt's constructed the story. It goes on long enough to fill 90 minutes and have and include a racist word in there as well.
Yes, that also got marked down for that, I have to say. And to be fair, I'm aware that there are debates in fandom that may not have been Brian Haley's who wrote that, or Derry Davis, may have been ad-libbed in the production and nobody caught it. But the fact is, nobody caught it.
Yeah.
Everyone holds
that point. They should know better than to include that.
Unfortunately, it's also very dull, and maybe it would improve if we had the missing episodes, but there are a lot more missing episodes I'd rather have first.
Absolutely.
28 has I wouldn't say massive, but a sizable reappreciation society among fandom. And I went into it hoping to become one of them because, there's nothing I love more than seeing one of these things and going, this is much better than the grumpy old fans thought. Unfortunately, number 28 is the Web Planet.
Sacrilege.
I so wanted to like it. I really did. But there's so many long periods where nothing happens. It is at most a 3-parter stretched to twice the length.
It has to be that long because they have to have that much money to create, create Vortis. The issue here is David Whittaker seemed to have a really good idea of what you could get away with in a studio. Dennis Spooner, not so much. He gets a little tough. It's okay. We'll do, we'll do an entire story set on a planet which requires atmospheric density jackets to walk around on, which just has butterflies and ants and venom grubs and no other human characters. I mean, it's a hell of a brave thing to do. I have to give it credit for the ambition. That's probably why I rate it a little more high. Either leave this as the last story or give someone psychedelic drugs before watching it.
That's what I should have done. I should have had my Jack Daniels first.
Several. The whole bottle, probably.
I do like the Zarbi. They're not even antagonists. They are innocent animals that have been enslaved by some horrific monster.
The animals.
Yes. And I don't think like's the right word, but I appreciate the storytelling part where the bug self-sacrifices and the acid flow.
Sticks his head in the wall.
Yes. And William Russell is very good at portraying how horrified he is by this. Well, everyone else treats it as a perfectly normal thing on the planet. And that is one of the best depictions of alien culture shock.
It's also quite a nice little bit of socialism there. One, the masses are more important than the individual.
But unfortunately, there's 6 episodes of padding to go with it, and even at the end, they defeat the big villain, and it still lingers on longer than Return of the King, Peter Jackson.
Or the end of time, part 2.
I'm going to have to say to one of my oldest, dearest friends, Aidan Brack, the editor of Mysteries Ahoy, dear friend. He loves this story. So if he just wants to, fast forward a few minutes, number 27 is The Savages.
Well, I get The Savages is one of these stories that's so difficult to judge because, obviously no one's seen it in 50 plus years now. And, the novelization is quite a kind of straightforward, blandish take on it. So the thing I really want to see about it, I want to see the physicality of Freddie Jage's impression of Hartnell. Because it sounds brilliant from the audio we've got. And the end of it, I like the idea of the end of it, where, again, the TARDIS crew incite a revolution. That's the innovation of the Jerry Davis and Ian Lloyd era. Do we need to end the story? Blow everything up. That'll do.
To be fair, it works. It works. Uncle Terry does that 9 times out of 10 himself.
Absolutely. But he has a story to get. Robert Holmes does it every single time.
my big issue with The Savages is that so many of the characters are written like idiots. There's a whole section where Stephen and Dodo have escaped to the cave where all the good guys hide, and the guards are outside, but the guards are afraid of the dark, conveniently. But they're at the gates, they're at the edge, and they've got their weapons that can possess people. So one of the good guys takes Stephen to an escape route, and they go up this escape route for 5 minutes, only to find it's a dead end. By which point the guards, who we had been told were too scared of the cave, had quite happily forgotten this phobia and joined in because they were needed to for the plot to move forward.
One thing I can say about, which will explain every deficiency about the people on this advanced planet, this is the planet of the Doctor Who fans. They want to start a story. They are watching the entirety of Doctor. Yeah, Doctor. Yeah, we've been following your trip. Yeah,
and they didn't save any of it on YouTube.
Bastards.
Stephen gets a great farewell scene. We've got snippets of it via some lovely person who put a camera up to the TV and took 5-second shots of the scene. Oh,
I can't fault that.
Cream of the cream of 60s fandom, whoever it was. And in episode 2, which is otherwise interminably dull, there is a moment where Frederick Tiger face up says to the Doctor, "Why are you trying to slow us down? We're on your side." And William Hartnell has one of his great sort of roaring Doctor moments where he goes, "I will oppose you just as I'd oppose the Daleks and any other forms of prejudice or bigotry in the universe." And you think, go on, Doctor.
William Hartnell is so good at those scenes. Just that anger. It's almost better than any other Doctor, because even when he's being this, kindly little curmudgeonly old man, there's something under the surface there. That little fury is not too far away.
It's good because at the very start of the show, they have him use that as his being suspicious of Ian and Barbara. But by the time you've got 3 years into the show, he's using it as being the champion of the dispossessed and the vulnerable and the downtrodden, and that's what makes the show. He
changes the character fundamentally. It's almost like a thing that Innes Lloyd and Jerry Davis do. They move the Doctor from this guy who's just wandering around the universe, jackdaw meandering, as it's put later, to being a protagonist of the stories.
Yes.
We figure that out.
But, I mean, if they didn't, would the show have carried on like it did forever and ever?
No, you couldn't have done that, I don't think.
Anyway. The Avengers had a good run, but it ended. Doctor Who kept going.
It's not just the character being able to regenerate, it's the entire format. of you can, to me, part of the joy of Doctor Who is just the juxtaposition of so many things. And it's never better than in that first 2 series, particularly when Verity Lambert is producing. You don't know what you're going to get from week to week. Alphabet.
Number 26 is The Ark.
Yeah, I can. It's a really great idea. You can see why it was commissioned. I think it was a Donald Tosh commission off the top of my head, and Donald Tosh is obviously being a bit more cerebral. And it's a terrific science fiction idea because you never had the TARDIS crew face the consequences of their own actions before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this does really well. Unfortunately, you look at it and you go, it tends to read as something, as a bit of a colonial thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't come across well on that score for me.
My dovetail from it is that I'm okay with the first 2 episodes where you've got the whole very unsubtle apartheid metaphor going here, and you've got, but they use it to point out some home truths, like the fact that the Guardians are seen as more important than the poor old monoids who are falling dead all over the place and being ignored. And note that the only character who is at all ever pleasant to them in the first 2 episodes is the Doctor, who treats them like he would any other character.
The cliffhanger with the statue is superb.
Yes, that is the pivotal moment of the thing. But no, but the problem is that from that cliffhanger, everything falls apart, because the whole metaphor of the first 2 episodes is that this is apartheid. And then in episode 3, Odo's gold has caused a revolution, and the monoids are now in charge, and they are stock bad guys. And that's where your whole thing completely falls apart.
I can see the intention of it, and I think this kind of maybe falls down between, it's something that falls between Donald Tosh quitting and Jerry Davis coming in. So it is quite clumsy, and Jerry Davis's scripts aren't particularly good on their race relations, I don't think. But it's meant to be a story, I suppose, of don't be a bastard when you're in charge. Again, it plays the monoids as just the caricature villains too much.
Plus, they're bloody thick. That's also quite bad.
Yes.
Even if it does have one of my favourite stupid moments in Doctor Who, where they're talking in front of Dodo, and Dodo goes, "Well, you better start now, because it'll take a while to evacuate all the humans. It may not take as long as you think. Ha, ha, ha. Are you up to something? No."
Oh, I thought you were going to mention the legendary security kitchen then.
Yes, well, that's a nice bit of budgetary.
Yes, it's a lovely bit of desperate script editing, that.
I mean, it's not on the same level as Barry Letts. It's easier to guard him in the corridor.
The enemy of the world.
Yes.
Glorious.
And to be fair, that's done to save the budget for the other episodes of
Yes.
Anyway the World. So I will defend that as a stylistic budgetary choice by a legend, but none of that applies to the Ark. Well, number 25 is another story which I know a lot of people like, and it's sort of similar to one of your top 5 stories, but I just find lots of the middle parts of it really slow going, and that's why it's this low. And it is number 25, which is The Chase.
I thought it would. It's a Terry Nation story. It's Terry Nation as Doctor Who, essentially. It does a great new Doctor Who story. As I say, what I think the comparison in the celebration book was Perils of Pauline. I love the time space visualizer. I love the only surviving footage we have of the Beatles on top of the pops is because of the chase.
Yes, and the irony is that when I watched it on BritBox, they cut that scene on copyright grounds.
Yes,
My mate main issues with the chase is how often characters do things out of character so they can move the plot. Like Stephen, not Stephen, wrong character. Like Ian randomly walking off into the middle of nowhere, just so he can get lost in a sandstorm.
Yes. Or Vicky just going, oh, I'll just wander off from everyone in the Festival of Ghana.
Yes. I'll go with that. That is by far my favorite episodes of The Chase because those scenes with Frankenstein and Dracula and the Ghost Woman versus the Daleks because
Oh,
the
the Grey
project.
Lady, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, that there's some really good stuff in there.
I adore the Doctor's explanation for it. You know,
Yes.
we're in somewhere where the human mind, the terrors of the human mind became real. It's like there's simpler explanations there.
But unfortunately, there's also 5 more episodes.
I like the mechanoids. Who doesn't like a mechanoid?
Although I will say, because the books always said that episode 6 was co-directed by Dougie Camfield, I always presumed that the final battle between the Daleks and the Mechanoids was Camfield because it looks like his kind of direction, to be fair.
It's
But
more dynamic.
I found out that no, that is Richard Martin. That is it. That was one of his last contributions to the show. And that is one hell of a way to go out on because that is just a fantastic piece of shot.
Absolutely. And I don't want to be, but it's slightly uncharacteristic of Richard Martin in a lot of ways for something
Oh,
so dynamic to be his last shot.
yes. No, I do like Richard Martin as he seems like a decent chap, but he's not going to be at the top of my greatest directors list.
I would put exactly that. I have met him once as well, so I can vouch for that. If you're not liking some hot Dalek on mechanoid action.
Oh, and before I leave the chase, sorry, I will add that the model shots of the mechanoids sort of city,
Yeah.
amazing. Raven
Yeah.
Cusick, yes, the Iridians from the planet the planet Iridius. It was one of the wettest planets in the universe, but now it is arid.
It's almost as if we were prophetic.
Number 24, Planet of Giants.
I can't particularly disagree with it being. I know in modern terms it's a series opener. They didn't think that way in the 60s particularly, and it was one of the things that was held up from the first recording block. But you can see why Verity Lambert went, look, we need to slice 25 minutes out of this. It's a lovely idea. The model shots in it are terrific. The giant animal.
Why?
It's gorgeous.
Raven Cusick again. Oh, that man was a genius.
But it's just a bit on the dull side. It's very, very low stakes, and it never quite overcomes the fact that it is just this. I know the threat is DN6 might devastate the world because capitalists are bastards.
It wants to tell a green story, but it doesn't have the subtlety and genius that other writers who wrote very good green stories for Doctor Who in the future had.
I think it probably works out that Louis Marks has pitched this because he read Silent Spring. I think it just about works on dates, but yeah, it's just there. Into the coveted top 23.
Coveted top 23. Number 23, Edge of Destruction.
I kind of like it. It's a very, very 60s show. It's a bottle episode. Get to know the character. It's not the filler story that fans were told of yore. That we just had it to fill in 2 episodes because Doctor Who might have got cancelled after 13 weeks. it's a fascinating kind of thing about bringing that. It unites the TARDIS crew again. It's perfect because we get how they relate to each other, and how they trust each other properly. How they've changed from the first episode, an earthly child. What have they done after they've been trapped in caveman times, after they've been to Skaro and the Doc's been a bit of an arse. How they solve a crisis. I think the thing that really counts against it, it's beautifully weird. The melting clocks. The TARDIS trying to warn them. You always got the idea the TARDIS is sentient, and that's beautiful. But you've got this, but you go, you don't really want to see Susan threatening Ian with scissors.
Yes,
would have been a lot shorter. Stories.
So many Hartnell stories rely on dodgy switches.
Or broken fluid links. Or, yes. Technology breaking down.
It's okay. It's okay, Doctor Who, but I'd say there are many stories that I would put above it, which I have. Yes, number 22 is my lowest ranked pure historical.
How dare you put one this low?
And it is The Reign of Terror.
I've got fondness for it again, but
I've just never really got on with it, I'm afraid. I think the fact that the episode with the most pivotal bits in it being missing hurts it quite badly. But I also find that episode 1 introduces a lot of immediate jeopardy and intrigue, which then turns into a long saunter to later on. It doesn't fulfill the promise it sets early on for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I always kind of wondered when was, because I think again Dennis Spooner, I think, was just what was on at the cinema. So was there an adaptation of A Tale of Two Cities around this point? I'm just because I remember seeing one in school, but again, it's the long tradition of the long and noble tradition of Doctor Who nicking it off the back of a lorry. So it was you've got the roadside, the roadside gang, with the and you've got the jailer, and that's really nice.
But weirdly, and this is going to sound hypocritical with some of the stuff to come much further down the list, but I find the jumping from to who we think are going to be our guest cast getting brutally massacred in episode 1 to comedy jailers really quite a sudden U-turn and hard to grasp.
I know with the Mythmakers and the Gunfighters, which we'll come to again, it's a deliberate. A deliberate choice. You've got 3.5 episodes of jolly fun romps in old times before the reality of it kicks in. But yeah, it's. I suppose you can argue it's more realistic that reality doesn't have those nice shifted tones. But this is it's fun. But I really want to watch it again now.
Barbara and Ian argue about the ethics of history and getting involved would be probably my favourite bit, and it's animated for somebody dunked the episode. And I would just point out that being the least good of the Hartnell historicals is not that bad a criticism when you compare it to its bedfellows.
Because they're great. 21.
And it's somewhat out of place given its name, because this is where Galaxy 4 is.
It's a thin story. There's no getting away from it. It's there's a planet exploding. There's two races of people on there. One of them looks ugly. One of them looks beautiful. Which one do you think are the bad guys?
Although I like how fandom always claim that was a twist, but when you listen to it with great difficulty, because it's not one of the most clear audios we've got, the missing episodes. and then you watch the episodes we have. It's very clear from the first step who the bad guys are. There is no twist.
Yes, it's a straightforward story. And I want to know it more because I know that William Ems was a local school teacher to me down in Newport.
Oh,
So
really?
he
Oh,
wasn't in my school, unfortunately.
I'm just getting old. I mean, one's trying to imagine how these things are. But what really interests me on DVD is somebody, probably Toby or Richard or one of the usual suspects in these DVD lines, but somebody has found an interview with William Ems and they put it on the DVD.
I haven't actually watched that yet, I'll confess.
Apparently, William Ems died in 1993. So that's more recently than I thought.
Yes, and he did actually have another script considered and wrote one of the Doctor Who Choose Your Own Adventure books in later years.
Oh, wow. I think if we had the rest of Galaxy 4, it would be higher, to be honest. Because there are two, apart from the guests, the regulars who are always great, Tika Shred, Hartnell, Purvis, O'Brien, top of the class. There are two MVPs from what bits we've got. And one is Stephanie Bidmead as the main villain, and the other is Derek Martinus, whose cinematography is just. I actually think that for the aesthetic eye for shots, he was better than Camfield. Genuinely.
The thing I think, but watch it, there's such a sense of space to that planet, and that takes a hell of a thing to do in that studio. And again, as I said earlier, the thing that we couldn't know, that we the sort of little moments we can't see, that you got back, and it was that monologue from Stephanie Bidmead.
Yes, and it had the flashback.
It's framed gorgeously. It's acted just absolutely beautifully.
And there's a flashback that I don't think any of us knew was in it at all, because it's over her. It's over a monologue, and the crashed spaceship has mud around it. It's just
little touches. Yeah, it's so yes.
So much thought has gone into those. So if it existed, but unfortunately, I can only judge it on what we've got. We're about to hit your top five for the first time. Number 20 is the Keys of Marinus.
An outrage, a complete outrage. All right.
The problem with Keys of Marinus is it is so Jekyll and Hyde. There are some really good moments in it, and there are some really Terry Nation moments. At his worst. I know I do like a good Terry Nation by numbers, but there are some really bad Terry Nation scripts in that one.
He was more interested in the setup and the situation than he was with anything to do with the resolution.
Apart from the fact that they managed to get George Coulouris and bumped him off 10 minutes into his debuts.
George Citizen Kane.
Yes, the very same. And he's factored in that. He's not just some guy who had two lines. It's quite a big role. But no, apart from that, the thing that sums it up for me is in one episode they've got the living garden, which is so interminably dull. And then the very next episode is the one with the rapist trapper in the ice storms with the wolves and the phantom people who come to life. And
that's a great bit, but yeah, it's a kid show, and it's not the only time this crops up in the Hartnell story. It's a threat of rape. It's just like 5:15 on a Saturday afternoon. Really?
It crosses the line. It provides real life horror and fantastical horror, and it implies that there's a massacre that you're away from at the end. It is one of the most astoundingly grim episodes of Doctor Who I have ever seen.
And this is why I love it. It's that juxtaposition. And you don't know if you're getting something good or awful.
You've got the really dull next to that, which Oh, it's just, it's insane.
Yes, I am not going to disagree. It's Terry Nation going, yeah, you can get away with all this in this tiny studio. You can do all this in 6 weeks. I can only imagine Verity Lambert's face when she saw that and going, bloody hell.
Play through part 5, which is the trial.
Yes.
William Hartnell shows up for the first time in 3 weeks. He's been off on holiday, and my goodness, did the show miss him?
Oh, yeah. And it turns out it lifts, doesn't it? Just when he
Yes,
comes back in.
it's instantly like, thank God he's back. Everyone's happy.
Yeah,
But
I'll just jump ahead a couple of goes. You can carry the show for yourselves. I'll still get paid while I'm on holiday.
number
You know,
19.
yes, enough of your sacrilege. On to number 19.
Number 19 is one that I actually still like more than a lot of people, but I can't rank it higher than a bunch of the ones that are yet to come, and that's the Sensorites.
I can understand why. I've just written a piece on the Sensorites for one of Stacey Smith's books
Ah,
because, again, it's got one of the best first episodes of the Hartnell era. One of them, in fact, one of the best first episodes because it's almost framed like a horror. You know, it's creepy horror.
yes.
What's there? And you know, it works out what's wrong with the spaceship. It's a alien, however many years early in a lot of ways on that front. And yeah, and then you get that face at the window at the end. And so that is brilliant. That whole first episode. And then then it needs to be 2 episodes shorter at least.
Oh,
I reach across. What have I got here?
Sensorites.
That's right. You're lucky I didn't pull out my celestial toy maker.
Oh, goodness.
I have got one.
Entirely inaccurate. It's still hard to say the Sensorites peaked about 2 minutes in when the TARDIS crew leave the TARDIS in the same shot. And that's such a brilliantly done effect. It's so brilliantly done that Mervyn Pinfield, the director, basically sits on his laurels for the rest of the series.
It's based on, I think, Peter R. Newman's experiences in the war.
Yes,
in the Far East.
It's loosely based on, he did a Hammer, not a Hammer horror, but a Hammer war film called
It's a Hammer
Yesterday's
production.
Enemy.
Yeah. Yes, he did.
And it's based on his experiences in the war. And I think this is it's a Doctor Who variant on the same idea.
Yeah, the astronauts on the planet who survives, they're the guys who don't know the war is over.
Yes.
So yeah,
it's quite a bit of Hiro Onoda in the jungle.
That's the guy. I think it's part of the reason it doesn't play so well these days, apart from the pacing of it, is that its concerns are of its very much of its time, the way that maybe Terry Nations are just extremely generally not. They are just boys' own adventure stuff.
I can't hate on one of the great bad lines of all time, plot wise, where she points out to the administrator that about his sash, non-Sensorites wouldn't be able to tell them all apart. And he turns to the camera and goes, I had never thought of that.
It's gloriously delivered, isn't it?
It would work as a sort of
that's a little bit racist, really, isn't it?
Yeah, the human it works if it's just the human characters sort of ethnocentrizing stuff. But when the actual Sensorites play it as real, number 18, and I should point out that I quite like the top 18. I would defend the top 18 against anyone who said they didn't like any of them. But one of them has to be 18 by default. And that is the Space Museum.
Again, like the Sensorites, one of the great first episodes of all.
Oh, yeah.
It's David Lynch in the Hartnell era almost a lot of the time. Just the weird visual effects they're playing around with. It's Mervyn Pinfield, I think, directing, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, playing around.
They brought him in for all the sort of technical stuff.
Yes, and it's so odd, and I think it's misunderstood a little. It's the point Rob Shearman makes on the DVD. it's kind of meant. It seems like it's meant to be a comedy. You know, you've got the Doctor jumping into a Dalek. You've got one of the Doctors being tortured on essentially the early mind probe. How did you get here? There's him on a bicycle.
Penny farthing. Yes. The problem with it being a comedy is nobody told the director, or
Yes,
seemingly
it was a mismatch.
half the cast. Main guest star Richard Shaw, who, to be fair, I have seen him in other stuff, and he was a really good actor, but he plays his role in the Space Museum in a sort of daze. And according to Toby, he actually the Richard Shaw suffered a really nasty concussion just before they filmed, so he's off his game entirely, and it shows.
Yeah, because it's I think Glyn Johns. You can see it in a way as kind of another apartheid metaphor almost because I believe Glyn Jones
South African, I believe.
African now. Want to be overthrown, you know.
Yes, unfortunately, Boba Fett and his mates are just sitting around going, "We must do something." And how long have they been having that chat? Seemingly for years.
And here's Vicky to kick you up the ass again. It's one fantastic episode. The problem is the rest of the story just can't live up to that, no matter if it is a comedy or not.
Yeah, and I do like your mate Rob's suggestion that actually it's their interaction with everyone on the planet which saves them because it creates a future where they aren't killed. It's always treated as sort of the ugly duckling of the Hartnell era for years. And there is a lot to like in Space Museum, but it is a flawed gem. Number 17 is Time Meddler.
Right, I'm smashing up the computer. Right.
Well, one of the main issues is the best stuff in it is Butterworth and Arnold, and we only get about 10 minutes of tops in the 4 episodes. But I will admit, I do mark this one down because of a certain scene in episode 2, which I think crosses the line completely off of what they should do in Doctor Who.
Yeah, Althea Charlton. Yeah, this is I will admit, despite the fact as I said, it is probably my favourite Hartnell. It's a big flaw in it. It's something, you know, I say it pops up in the Keys of Mariners and it's not comfortable then. It pops up here and you can say maybe, you know, it's part of the more sort of male dominated culture and you haven't got many, you know, you might have Verity Lambert keeping on it, but there aren't that many women in there to say, hang on a second, what are you doing putting this out on kids' TV?
I mean, Alethea Charlton, who, you know, she was also in Thriller, Someone at the Top of the Stairs, which I recommend. Our writing friend Jeff Hughes promotes that as one of his favourite episodes of Thriller, and it stands up really well as a creepy thing. She's in that, and she's great in it. And she probably had a good career, but she died ridiculously young of cancer, alas. And she is really good in the Time Meddler, and her connection with Hartnell is great, especially when he realizes what's happened and he's trying to be all kind of, if he doesn't know how to be to react to it. But it shouldn't be in Doctor Who.
Absolutely, and fair enough if that's it. That thing, I say, it's nothing you can argue against. On the, it does so many things so well, and that is something I can't fault people for, you know, writing it down.
So number 16, and can I just point out ahead of this, I am actually surprised it's as low in the rankings, but clearly, where did it get knocked down on? It got knocked down
with science
on logic and intrigue. So clearly, I was in a critical mood when I saw it in this marathon.
Well, you know, is it logic merely enables you to be wrong with authority?
Yes, true. Because number 16 is the Romans.
Yes, logic has you being very wrong with authority here.
Forward to it when I, you know, in this matter is one of the stories that I loved as a teenager, and it just a lot of it hit me quite cold, and I can't explain it really. other than
it can be the mood that you're in watching it.
yeah.
Sometimes. Oh, yeah, how can you not love, the Barbarian stuff in the first one, the comedy with knock each other out stuff. After they've clearly been, shall we say, enjoying a bit of relaxation together.
And it's not the more farcical stuff, it's the wordplay between Hartnell and Francis, Derek Francis, Nero. I particularly like his whole bit about being made to play the liar in the Colosseum.
The invisible liar.
Yeah, it'll be a roaring success. Something they can put their teeth into. Also, one of my favourite bits in Doctor Who. I've got lots of favourite bits of Doctor Who, but one that I really like is when the Doctor accidentally sets the map of New Rome on fire, and Nero's going nuts, and he has his plan about how he's going to put them on an island surrounded by alligators, and the tide will rise, and the alligators will get you, and then he makes his peace with the Doctor, and the Doctor turns to the guard and went, "There you go. Now let us go. You'll get some of that alligator treatment."
See, you've underrated it. You're talking yourself around here.
There is a lot of stuff in it that I like. I mean, I already mentioned Vicky trying to poison Nero, and
yes,
but I just feel like it's a lot of vignettes of things that I like rather than a whole overarching story that I like.
But I'm okay with Doctor Who sometimes being just an excuse to get to the next funny.
I mean, so am I. And if this was in the Colin Baker era, it would be top by miles. But it's in the Hartnell era, which is very strong. Yes. Number 15 is the one that we wouldn't hear if it didn't exist. The Daleks.
I see. I can see it's lower. It's actually, I have it lower. The cliffhanger is brilliant. The imagery is brilliant, but it is a very dull story, really, when watched today. Even by the standards of modern viewing, then it's dragged out too long. It's just a peaceful place, just the way we gave it.
It perks up any time the Daleks are on screen.
Absolutely.
But they're not on screen for whole episodes at a time.
No. And you can still see, again, the trick is you can see the Doctor. It's that first episode always sells the idea, and that first episode is brilliant because it's building up. It's what the hell's gone on here, the terror of the atomic bomb, what it might do to a civilization, and then what the hell is coming up the corridor towards Barbara? What the hell would survive a nuclear war? Is it a giant cockroach with a whisk in his hand? A sick plunger. And that is a brilliant companion. Jacqueline Hill sells that absolutely wonderfully, full on.
Yeah, but then for as important as episode 1 is, episode 2 is the one that made the show, when you actually see the Daleks in all their glory.
It's a fact that you've got that cliffhanger, oh my god, it's gone, and what you see lives up to it. Again, it's what a great design the Daleks are, fundamentally. Hurrah for Raymond Cusick here. I think we have to, because they're miniature tactics. Audiences kind of expect a guy in a rubber suit, maybe. It's fundamental reason why Doctor's here, and I cannot hate it for that reason.
I also like the fact that the Daleks have art around their city. They are the sideshow Bob of Doctor Who villains. They appreciate the fine things in life, but they also want to murder everyone.
No, it's the Doctor.
Yes. Oh, and it also has one of my favorite Hartnell fluffs. There are not as many of them in the show as people say. But it's one of my favorites when he mentions how Susan's going for the radiation gloves, and the reason it's my favorite is because as soon as he says gloves, the camera can't avoid catching the look of horror that appears in William Russell's face.
Yes. And let's face it, the only reason this adventure happens is because the Doctor is an arsehole.
Yes, yes. His ship's fine, and then he
Yeah,
wants. Did you enjoy talking about Daleks there? How about some more Daleks?
I think that's a good
Number
idea.
14 is the Dalek Master Plan.
So Daleks, and more Daleks. That it's just got it just has that sense of an epic thing. They will check anything to keep this story going for 12 weeks because if the controller of the BBC comes in and goes, "Can you do 12 weeks with the Daleks?"
And they went, yes. And
Yeah.
then they gave it
Okay.
John Wells. They were leaving.
Oh, yes. I'll pass it on. Yeah. Here you go, John. Have fun with that.
Yes.
Is it any wonder John Wiles was so grumpy?
Yes. I mean, he does have a fantastic track record in his few stories, but my goodness, I wouldn't want an entire series.
Such a Verity Stamp at least has the understanding that if you're going to make this show for Saturday afternoon, you make it kind of, maybe not like you have the jeopardy, but you end up in a good place.
Yes.
With this, we'll bump off a few companions, and oh yeah, and then we'll show one of history's worst massacres.
First episode might be one of Terry Nation's finest scripts.
Yes.
Because it is every single bit of it furthers character or plot. It is the most stripped down Terry Nation you will get. That part one of the Dalek Master Plan. And then they counter it with some of the later episodes where nothing happens for 25 minutes.
Oh, okay. It's past the Terranium core, isn't it?
Yes. The episodes in Ancient Egypt do have that fantastic shot of the sun rising over the Dalek's frame, which we have, but they could have done that elsewhere and not had 2 episodes meandering around Ancient Egypt.
The model work as well.
Mhm.
Is the stuff of the spa landing that we've got is stunning.
Yeah.
As I said, it's when they go into the machine and they're transported halfway across the universe to a penal planet, the effect of their travel through space is wonderfully psychedelic.
Apparently, Stanley Kubrick was inspired by that.
It was no, that was Catherine's death scene. He was inspired.
Was
by.
it? Oh,
it was the spacewalking stuff
also a bit we don't have.
He asked them how they did it, and they said, "Yeah."
That's the annoying thing, though, because episode 4 has Katarina dying, Nick Courtney dies, although he gets better when he gets recast later on, the Brigadier. It has a traitor unmasked, and it introduces Jean Marsh, and it wasn't wiped. What happened, if I recall correctly, is some other show borrowed it. Was it Blue Peter? That one Blue Peter borrowed, and then it never came back.
That's the 10th Planet 4.
Oh, okay, well, some other show borrowed part 4, and it never came back. So technically, it could be out there somewhere.
Obviously, I'd love to see part 12. Again, I know it's grim, but it just looks such an exciting piece of Doctor Who.
I would quite like to see the Feast of Stephen turn up, because if that can turn up, everything can turn up.
You and I are one mind on that.
But I would like to see episode 8 show up, because that scene with the cricket so blatantly inspired Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yes.
That Douglas Adams puts it in one of the Hitchhiker's books. Well, number 13 does not have Daleks, but it's from the tail end of the series. Well, not the series, sorry. It's from the tail end of the Hartnell era. It is the War Machines.
I'm surprised it's this low, because again, this is something I'd have a lot higher. Again, it reinvents the show.
I would point out that from this point, there is about 13 stories which are separated by 9 points, so it's very close. That I always go back to in the War Machines is that hanger where the army and the Allies and even Ben go back from the marauding killing machine, which has just wiped out an entire platoon.
Yes.
But the Doctor stands, and not only stands, he walks forward in its path, blocking it. It's the sole defender of humanity, and that is just such an amazing
And
scene.
that's the point. You can always go, that's where the series reinvents itself as
Yes.
the Doctor versus the alien. It's glorious. And things Hartnell can pull this off.
Hmm.
Triton is obviously a more physically able actor at the point, but Hartnell really does a beautiful job in this. And it's the only time he gets to do this, really.
Yeah, he gives it a good authority, sort of this.
Yes.
Um, I just finished the 10th Planet, not for the first time, but I just finished it at the weekend there at the time of recording, and it's really quite genuinely sad to see that you see Hartnell in the War Machines, and you can hear him in the Smugglers, and he's still relatively in the top of his game. But then, if you go to from like episode 2 of the 10th Planet, which was filmed a few months later, the decline is just it's really sad. You can see he is physically a lot frailer, and he's not quite up to the the big Doctor moments that he would have been so great at
He
even
only
5 months earlier.
Yeah, we'll come back to it, but this the confrontation with the Sidemen is the one big scene he gets in the story of
Yeah, the War Machines is the last great Hartnell moment as the Doctor, as Hartnell as the Doctor that we've got, and that's quite sad, really.
and it's a good one to go out again. It's the first time, for obvious story reasons, that they've been able to film in contemporary London as it
Hmm.
is. And of course, a word, because Kit Pedler basically does predict the internet here.
Yes. Oh, yes. He predicts the internet. Um, he took he clearly read the theses that were going in scientific journals at the time,
Hmm.
and he works out how they'd work in reality, and he predicts it before the big experiments in America were fully known, and he pretty much gets it almost spot on.
Jerry Davis and Jerry Davis's pitch to his writers essentially was, he could see the post office tower out his window. What would you how would you get that in the Doctor Who story? What would an alien threat from, and Pedler worked it out.
Yes,
And
I
that's
mean,
what
there's a lot of kind of mockery of the fact that he was the scientific advisor, and yet he comes up with stuff like tea trays and all
yeah,
kinds of goofery. But that wasn't his job. His job was to be an enthusiastic scientist friend of the production team who could suggest ideas that they could make stories out of. And that's what he did with the War Machines and the 10th Planet and the Moon Base and so on. And I mean, I think I think he was a very important figure in Doctor Who history.
absolutely. I thoroughly recommend the biography by Michael Seeley. I don't know if it's still
I'm
available, but
I'm trying to get a copy, but it's out of print. I've been told by the writer that it will be available at some point in the future again, and I've been waiting patiently. Number 12, and it's the Dalek invasion of Earth.
again, I do like the way they get round the fact they can't go back to contemporary Earth,
Hmm.
but they want to do a Dalek story invading a
Yes.
familiar place. What do? You've met these guys in an alien world. What's the next thing to do? You have them invading the familiar. So, London looks very, very much as it did in 1965.
Yes.
Fine.
Yes.
So
Look at the Baker's Wharf
it's a
and
big
that.
high concept idea, and it's carried by that high concept idea.
Yes.
I prefer the film, I have to be honest. But
Well, the film does have Cribbins.
exactly. They see
That's
nothing.
but the thing I like about Invasion of Earth, the TV version, is how the Daleks are fundamentally absolute bits.
Yes.
They let that guy in episode 2 try every escape route until they corner him and kill him. They killed the guy off screen who's having a meltdown about how they murdered his entire family. That is quite killing, and you don't see any of it; you hear it.
No,
Oh,
it's Terry Nation doing war film. Essentially,
yes.
what happens if the Nazis invaded Britain? So you can see it as a variation on stuff like "Went the Day Well" and that sort of.
Hmm. And you've got Baker, who's only in it for an episode, and he comes across as quite an amiable chap. Is caught, surrenders, and they just kill him straight
Yeah,
up. And the bit that sticks with me most of all is Dortmund's death.
yeah.
Because the chap in the
Come
scientist in the
on,
wheelchair,
take you one through one at a
he
time.
he spent 4 episodes being this sort of one minded. This bomb will save the day, and
Monomaniacal almost, yeah.
he goes into he makes his final stand against the Daleks. And he throws his bomb, and they pause their extermination just long enough so he realizes his bomb doesn't work.
Yes, the sadism is
Yes.
beautifully done. And the other thing that really, the question that always puts in my mind, what have the Daleks got against elephants?
But I also do like the fact that Bernard Kay, who can't do a bad performance if his life depended on it, he just went for the great E stars. And Anne Davis, who sadly died a few months ago, is the pseudo replacement companion. And they are such pessimistic, downtrodden characters, but they keep coming back to save people because it's the right thing to do, even when they think it's doomed. And as a result, they're the characters who get the hope and joy of a second chance at the end.
It's kind of Secret Army, isn't it?
Yes. Number 11, which is one that apparently everyone who goes through a Hartnell marathon comes back and says, hey, this story's really underrated to the point where it's become a fandom meme, I'm told, when I've tried to tell everyone how great this story was compared to the old fandom theories. And it is the story which I believe is Doctor Who's M.R. James ghost story for Christmas, The Rescue.
I think I should shut up on this one purely because Michael has put his take on this to me for a long, long time, and it's a really beautiful take. So, when you say it's an M.R. James ghost story, how are you seeing this?
Well, you see, it follows the M.R. James rules for ghost stories practically to a T. You're introduced to Bennett, who has got away with some horrific crime in the near past. He's massacred practically an entire planet and his crew, and he has plans, nefarious plans involving poor old Vicky, poor young Vicky, for the future. You get into this, you get the Doctor and that, but then Bennett is played as somebody who feels haunted by something, and at the end, what you build up to this crescendo where Bennett has the Doctor at his mercy when what should appear but these shadowy figures who arrive just at the spot where the ghost would appear. Where if you think of the tractate Midoff, they think that he's got the book, but there comes the spidery thing. That's where they come in at the end. And if you ignore the novelization, you can really beat it as his victims coming back to save future victims. So it completely fits into the M.R. James tradition. I love that.
I cannot put any more beautifully than that, And the only thing I'd add, what did Barbara, what has Barbara got against Sandy?
No,
That's
it's
evil.
if you saw a friendly sand monster going up to say hi, just like somebody's dog, you take it a blaster and blow it apart. I mean, Vicky forgave her far too easily in my book.
Absolutely. But that's when they knew they could go together. When she forgave her. I mean, where else is Vicky got to go, I suppose, but
No, I always used to think the rescue was quite a fun one, but when it suddenly hit me how much of M.R. James' rules for ghost stories you could fit as a template around it without breaking the structure. I had so much more newfound appreciation for it as a story.
I like that.
Top 10. And did you think that Doctor Light stories were invented by RTD? Because no, here's one from the 60s called Mission to the Unknown.
I kind of have this in my sort of hovering around the middle episodes. It's a really nice short story, and the version, I think the Preston, is it the University up in Preston, the University of Central Lancashire, if I'm not mistaken. The version they did of it was absolutely beautifully done. But it's kind of it's always insubstantial, and we don't see it as we saw it, as the audience might have seen it then, because to us it's just this prelude to the Dalek master plan.
I mean, I think it works best because the Doctor isn't in it. So you see what would happen in the universe if he wasn't there doing a Doctor Who story. Everyone dies.
It's taking away hope, isn't it? And
Yes.
it makes the Daleks more powerful by extension on that.
And it also makes Master Plan Episode 1 work even better because you've got Nick Courtney in the exact same spot, and just when he's about to die, the TARDIS lands. Like,
Oh yes,
yeah.
that's beautiful. That's kind of beautiful storytelling for my.
Yeah. As an audio, it works really well. It's got Edward D'Souza as the lead, Mark Corey. He's still going at time of recording. He's 90 this year. He did an interview when they did the recon you were talking about,
Yes, I remember it.
and he was also in Sapphire and Steel. He was very creepy in Sapphire and Steel. And the last episode before it got axed.
Oh, that was creepy.
But no, I think this one works really well as a sort of as a vignette of the Dalek universe when the Doctor isn't there. So number 9 is the reason. Well, it is the reason we're here. It is an unearthly child.
I mean, what to say? I have to say that first episode of Unearthly Child, because I watch it might be the most watched bit of television I've ever seen.
Yes, and it's sensational.
It's perfect. It's a perfect introduction. It's set at the. What do you need to know? There's a mysterious girl. She's got this weird home background. Have a look into it. Hang on, there's a guy in space. Got a space and time machine. What's going on?
Oh,
And again, it's very much like Rose in a lot of ways. In that, for the first half, it's a very contemporary drama. It's almost kitchen sink, to a lot of ways. And then you get halfway through, woomph, there's a twist. You hook the audience, you've got them, and then you take them somewhere extraordinary.
It is notable that the 3 most successful reboots of the series all take the same basic form, where you're introduced for your human companion who slowly, by degrees, product placement.
Booked about it.
You're
written exactly this essay.
Yes, it's Unearthly Child's Rose, and Spearhead from Space is the one in the middle, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
They all kind of follow the same pattern of reintroducing Doctor Who to the masses, and
Yes.
they all clearly worked fantastically.
And yet, then, if you want to see something that doesn't quite work as well, you have a look at the TV movie. The cavemen episodes are often neglected or derided, but they are terrifically well directed for that studio. They're really atmospheric. And the thing is, and particularly the final fight with Zara and Cal, you're watching that, in the 60s, they don't cut that much. because the number of cuts that go from the film of the film inserts the sequences to the reactions of the TARDIS crew, it's still pacey for that day. It's because Wallace Hussein is such a good director.
You can see why he went on to so many big projects later.
Absolutely.
It's also I do like the fact that we've got famous socialist actor Aileen Way playing old lady some 30 years before she actually died of old age.
Yes.
I think she was typecast as old parts for most of her life. It's one of your favorite stories. I'm being sarcastic. It is the 10th planet.
Oh, Michael and I have a cordial disagreement over this. I would go so far as to say that as a pure story, it's one of my least favorite Hartnells, because I know there are circumstances behind it. It relegates the Doctor to nowhere. The Cybermen, I will concede, are such a brilliant design. It's so creepy where they just open their mouth and hold them there, so the sound just comes out. The lips don't move, and then it just closes at the end. Everything about the Cybermen is creepy. You can see the hands. It's one of my favorite monster designs, and you can see why Peter Capaldi wanted it back for his last story. I'd have asked for it, frankly.
Yes.
But the whole story amounts to, well, if we just hang around, and wait, it'll all go away. No one affects the outcome of the story whatsoever. The only it's artificial drama. It's one general thinks that these, if we fire a bomb, we'll get rid of them. I'd love the psychological tests there, because any general like that, really.
In marathon speak, there is what is known as the Hobson to Robson scale of base under siege commanders, and General Cutler is at the Jarvis Bennett end of the scale.
He's kind of Doctor Strangelove in a lot of ways.
And that's not a mark on Robert Beatty, who actually takes a very, I said, two-dimensional, possibly one-dimensional in places character, and lifts so much of it through his acting, his line reading choices, and the way he reacts. And he was a very good actor, and he is doing his best with rubbish characterization.
Yes. I do think the one element of the plot I really do like is the first astronauts who were up in space.
Oh yes, Earl Cameron.
Earl Cameron, and it's well, and because for years I'd only read the Target book. That bit always, it's so bleak, it terrifies me, because they're basically doomed as soon as Mondas comes on the scene.
The bit where they can't get to Earth because what they thought was Mars is actually Mondas appearing. They can't even move their arms because the planet is sucking their life force as well as this.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. Yeah. I mean that whole idea, again, it's grim, but it's so brilliantly executed. You've got Earl Cameron, my God.
Very good. But I mean, there is an MVP to the 10th planet though, and his name is Derek Martinus.
Absolutely.
This is so high up in the list because it is one of the most beautifully shot Doctor Who's you'll ever see. I mean, there are whole bits on the page where it's like clearly this is now panning for 4 minutes, but in his camera work, he is making it dynamic and live. And the episode 3 cliffhanger where it's just a countdown, but he pans over the entire crew, so you see all their characters, they're thinking on screen without them saying anything, and then it cuts, so it goes across the entire crew, and it just crashes right back into Robert Beatty's face, and you can see he's gone completely nuts, and that's just a fantastic cliffhanger made out of nothing.
Can't argue with it.
And there's another shot where he's in the get in the room, and the camera focuses right out. There's a long take into the edge, and then suddenly zooms round and up over someone. And I have no idea how he managed that camera shot in a BBC
Oh,
studio.
not that. Absolutely.
It's um
I just say it does have Hartnell's last great moment,
yes,
when he's facing down the Cybermen.
Derek Martinez has so many. Every shot has thought and care put into it. Um, and there's another. So I'm not going to describe every single camera shot in the 4 episodes. Don't worry. But there's another one where the Cutler meets the Doctor for the first time, and they're in the sort of the room where you enter if you're coming up from above in
Yeah,
the snowstorm. Um, and they're arguing with each other, and then Robert Beatty turns and walks out the room, and the camera immediately cuts to him walking into the control room. But because they've done it, they've made it clear that he is literally it's the same motion that he's walking through that door. So Martinez is showing how small the actual base is in this one. It's a really clever. It's a trick. It's a trick of editing, but it's flawlessly fluid. It's um
glorious director.
yes, and obviously I have to mention the actual tundra above with the snow and the soundscape is just fantastically done.
The blizzard. There was Cybermen walking through the
Yes,
blizzard again. A
yes,
lot of the impact of the Cybermen is the way Martinez shoots them in that first shot.
it's fun. And the club Tito who just wanted to pair over Polly, but then he gets bumped off in episode 1, and the creature takes his fur coat off, and the camera pans up. You see the human hands, and then the robot, and then the dead eyes, and it's just
Oh,
you've got an iconic monster there. And they haven't even spoken yet.
totally. And it's made again. Let's credit Derek Martinez as much as Sandra Reed on that, I think.
Yes, number 7 might suffer from the lack of moving images, because it is genuinely hard to keep focusing on it if you've got attention issues. When it's 7 episodes that are missing, and that's Marco Polo.
Again, this is a story. It's almost unlike any other Doctor Who story because it's a travelogue, and you don't get any Doctor Who story that takes place deliberately, over a period of months and wants to show that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of it's almost the way Terry Nation kind of put a story structure in and we can drop in however many episodes we want in here. But stuff one of my most wanted episodes to come back is the Singing Sands. I want to see the Ping Cho story. I would love to see it because it looks absolutely stunning.
I mean, the Singing Sands. There are people wondering about how could it look as good as it sounds, but then my case for the defense is look at the tundra in the 10th Planet. That looks amazing. Boris Hussein was an equally great director. Yes, It probably looked amazing.
I'm sure Kublai was a nasty dictator in a lot of ways, but I love the way they play him here. That old man with the yeah.
Of course, Mark Eaton's very good in it. I'm playing a decent Marco Polo. I suppose it's unusual for folk who are more used to him chasing people around tram cars. As a horrible husband and Corey. I always find it funny that apparently he was a genuinely lovely guy, and he's regarded with much affection by all his co-stars, but the public associated him with this one of the most horrific body soap villains that there's ever been in British TV.
God, yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is, they want the idea of this whole series is to teach kids about history. And they started off with one of the most unreliable pieces of history ever written. You know, it's practically "Here They Be Dragons" stuff. You know, Marco Polo's diaries. I mean, about the Hartnell historicals. It really isn't Anglo-centric.
Mm.
It's never particularly about English history. You know, we say the Time Meddler, but that's not quite being a
Yes.
historical story. You know, you go to France twice. You go to the Jaffa. You've got Marco Polo here. You go to Mexico. They don't. You can make a case of the fact that the Italian might be from a small mind 60s point of view, but it's genuinely trying to expand people's horizons.
Yeah. Alas, it's lost. And the rumor that it was back a decade ago turned out to be rubbish. Um,
The Omni rumor. Oh,
there is not a week that goes by that I don't think about the Omni rumor and so wish it was true.
you and me
Uh,
both. Anyway, there will always be
yes,
another
yes, they're not finding any. They're all. It's been 9 years. There's none more coming back. Number 6, and this one is a lot higher than it would have been before I did this marathon. The first time I'll be able to properly appreciate it. And that's the Mythmakers.
Hey,
Because the audio is really quiet and I am very deaf. You have to I had to put headphones on and listen really hard. And when you do that, you realize what a good story it is. But what we've got left to appreciate it is really difficult. But I understand why a lot of people can't get into it. Because if we had this springy episode in the bloody archive that we're meant to, it would be much more appreciated.
said why I like it. It's such a beautiful, elegant story.
It is
So
very,
many lines.
it is very Blackadder.
Yes, it's entirely. And as I say, it's Donald Cotton tells the same story twice about humanity's tendencies to mythologize
Mhm.
things.
You've got the characters like Odysseus, who is so kind of cynical and hates everyone. You've got the try-hard Achilles, who so wants everyone to believe his stories of war, and no one's interested.
And you can tell
Um,
everyone just going, get out of town.
uh, and you've got the king, who was quite happy for Helen to run off in the first place, and is annoyed that everyone else has dragged him off in a war to claim his faith
Just has
back.
to do it to show. It's like, oh,
No, Helen's not in this story at all.
no.
Um,
The reason for the war off screen.
a lot to like about it, and there's a lot which we can project was probably good about it. But annoyingly, we can never fully appreciate it because so much of it is clearly relying on visual comedy and moves and stuff, and it's gone. 5. This one may surprise you because it surprises me, to be honest. Number 5 is the Smugglers.
There's a lot of episodes here that with no stories here with no episodes that are up at the moment.
I
I
know.
like it.
I mean, and I admit this one may have recency bias because it's one of the last ones I saw to the tail end of the Hartnell era. But my goodness, the plot is so thick. There is so much happening. It crams so much into 4 episodes. You've got all of these characters who they stem from being outright villains like Pike to dodgy people who try to think they're in the right place, like Paul Whitson-Jones' Squire, to the fallen characters like James DeMarnie's Churchward and Cooper, the landlord, and they're all trying to blackmail or backstab each other, and there's plots upon plots, and all of them think the Doctor is working with the others to unveil their, and it's very thick plotting.
It's
Um,
what I really like, kind of, and it's there with Donald Cotton's story to an extent. They work out the best way to do historicals is to kind of do pastiche. And this, if I'm not mistaken, I've never read them, but the Dr. Sin novels apparently what they're taking off here.
And one of the things I find interesting is that The Smugglers has made my top 5 despite having 5 points penalty taken off.
Why did you take a penalty here?
I took points off on the logic slash intrigue of the story because I so disliked the bit where the companions use pretend voodoo to scare the thick historical,
Yes.
and I took a few points off for Jamaica, who is
Oh yes.
such a
A very
stereotypical, and it's thing because he's played by Eroy Josephs, who was such a pioneer in his field, but the character is just he's played as a thick non-white character basically, and
yeah.
he's got a great death scene. It's a really great death scene, but he's just there as a thick pirate who gets killed, and that's a terrible, terrible role for.
Yes. Oh,
As I was watching it, I was thinking, would would this work more if instead of them boffing Jamaica over the head to escape, because they catch him out, if Jamaica and Roger's character helped the Doctor escape, and so his death is because Pike realizes he has betrayed him, so he has some agency to his role in the plot.
he
Would that
does.
improve things?
Yes.
Because that was me just thinking off the cuff. I mean, without editing or anything. Because as it is, he's just there to be a comedy, duff, black character, and no higher if it wasn't for that.
I'm impressed. It was that. I do agree. It's kind of because it's missing.
Hmm.
It's neglected. It's
Yes.
it's one of those that no one talks about. Like down
Yes.
in Savages and maybe even sometimes Space Pirates. It's never been. It's now had the reputation of being bad enough to be forgotten
On the
completely.
plot, sorry, on the plus side, it's got, as I say, it's got a very thick plot. It's got some really good action scenes, which we can see quite a bit of because of Aussie censors behind QB8s.
Yes,
And
and you have some some early
yes,
cine footage as well. Obviously,
yes. So what we see of it makes it look like it was done really well too. Um, and the character interaction, like there's a scene in episode 3 where Pike and Cherub, who's played by George Cooper from Green Hill,
right? Oh,
yeah, um,
oh,
and
glorious, Mr.
they're
Good.
they're meeting with the Squire, uh, and all 3 characters are secretly planning to backstab the others, and they all know the other ones are clearly thinking that, but they can't admit it public. And it comes across as it's probably a really great scene to watch if you saw it.
It's almost sitcom, isn't it? It's almost fast.
Escape and he stays because it's his ethical duty to protect people, even if they've been utter gets to him.
No, I'd find that really fascinating. I'm gonna have to read it because I don't think I've watched it in like 10, 12 years at least. Or
Uh,
listened to it.
I think if it existed, people would have to acknowledge the role of Jamaica and some of the badly dated bits in part 2. But I think they'd also appreciate the whole shape of the plot and the
The
overall
cover,
writing.
yeah.
There's a lot to like about the Smugglers, but as long as you acknowledge that there are bits that you have to say are a bit dated and
I think Innisfree particularly achieved so much in later years. They are quite careless about the social aspect and the racial aspect of the Who in particular.
Well, that's the thing about the 10th Planet is it's very blatantly multicultural. You've got Errol Cameron, you've got the assistant to Geneva too, and apparently that was at the request of Kit Pedler, who wanted to show the future would be all kind of like that. So,
And obviously that extends to some story later in season 4. I can't quite remember it now. I think,
some base story.
but yeah,
Um,
place the
Number 4, The Crusade.
again. David Whittaker wants to do something Shakespeare. I
Yes.
don't think it's in blank verse off the top of my head.
I believe a lot of it's in iambic pentameter, but I don't think all of it is.
Which is a hell of a feat for a 60s
Yes.
TV script. But you can imagine the delight of actors who are getting dialogue with that rhythm, with that
Yes.
power. And like, how can you not love a story that has Jean Marsh in it opposite Julian Glover?
Yes.
You know, the story, the bits we've got with those two go at each other, I could watch them forever. And frankly, you know, when they came out on the Hartnell years and the Lost in Time DVD, I pretty much did.
Well, when I first saw episode 3 on the Hartnell thing, I was bored stiff, but I was 9. And
Yes,
it's not really,
the
it's
kid
not
story.
the Hartnell story to show a 9-year-old. Dialogue is some of the best the show's ever had. Um, Barbara's story is easily one of the grimmest, but also highlights all the strengths that make her great as a companion, like her
Oh,
humanity and how she'll always be. She survives because of her loyalty and protection of other people who she'd only met in the story.
the cliffhanger on it's Fadden's face, I think.
Ella Keir,
Malakir's
yes,
face. Oh, and that's chilling. You
yes.
watch that and you're like, oh, where's the last episode? I had to go back and reread the book straight.
I know modern audiences do have a problem watching it because obviously Ben Orcasian dressed up as a Saladin.
Yes,
Although I do know that the story still portrays Saladin, both actor and script, with far more dignity than the Oscar-nominated Othello with Laurence Olivier from the same period did, which
yes.
shows that the past really is a different country. I acknowledge that it would have been better to have a non-white actor in this crucial role. And it definitely would today when we've got more non-white actors being allowed to actually
Yes, there's
advance.
much great diversity.
Um, but I would note that the script always treats the character with as much, in fact, more dignity than it actually gives Richard the Lionheart.
Richard Lance, Julian Gill plays it brilliant, but he comes out of it so badly. You know, he comes out of it as almost a historical monster.
Yeah,
Yeah,
to be fair, he was.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I also love how Jean
I love the
Marsh
honesty of that.
Jean Marsh is the princess. They introduce her as such an amiable, nice person who gets on with Vicky and the Doctor, so that when she shows her true colours as a thriving religious bigot, it's genuinely shocking. Even
Yeah,
though it is truth in television, that's what it was like at the time.
all the English characters in this, apart from the regulars, are absolute bastards, basically.
Yes.
You know, the Earl of Leicester in it. Good
Oh,
God.
God. Yes. It's so well done, but again, it's um it's in between reappraisal stages in modern fandom. Number 3, the Aztecs.
Again, it is one of those stories you go, is it as good as everyone says it is?
Yeah.
And you sit down, you watch it. No, it's better.
Yes.
Always forget how good this is.
It's
Because I
oh
the only criticism I would make is the fact that since we've had, you know, we've cleaned the pictures up, you can see the backdrops and say it wasn't meant to be seen on, 60-inch televisions with pin sharp pictures. It was seen on something much closer to the size of our computer screens with much less definition, and it was made to fool those people. But if you treat this as a stage play, as a power of a thing, and it is, let's face it, it gives Jacqueline Hill her finest 90 minutes in Doctor Who. It has a genuine moral dilemma of what do you do, and William Hartnell comes in and tells her you can't change it. It's impossible to change, but she does change it in a small way, because obviously Ortlog,
he ruins his life
in a bad way. It's a fate, and you have to love that the resolution of the story, the escape, is because the TARDIS crew's advanced knowledge. It's that they know something the Aztecs don't. Not that they're smarter. It's just purely what's the knowledge in their heads.
Yes. And it comes after 4 episodes where they have been outsmarted by the sort of engineering know-how of the Aztecs.
And the local know-how of the Aztecs.
Yes.
It's genuinely a culture clash, is what John Roth is portraying. And it's so well done. It's, you spend weeks immersed in society, and there are decent people in society. There are apps, Cloxetl, Toxel. I always get that wrong. Is what a villain! What a performance
on Ringham.
Ringham, absolutely. It's I think the comparison. I think it's when he made is Richard III.
Yes,
as this scheming guy, and he's. But he's not just he's perfectly motivated.
Yes.
Everything he does makes absolute sense from his point of view.
People say that he's playing it as Richard III as if that's a bad thing. They got one of the most respected Shakespearean actors of the time. He was a regular on stage and on TV in Shakespeare, and they got him in their show when it was 5 stories old to play a villain, and he's just incredible. He's
he's not unsympathetic in his motivations, but he's kind of the representation of the fact you can't fight against the bigger sweep of history.
And in the story, he is the doctor. Barbara is the antagonist. She's come to try and destroy his life. He's protecting protecting his people in his mind, and it's the way that he'll react differently. He reacts with anger in certain ways and fear in other ways, and is always kind of shifting his allegiances around depending on who's there. And because he was such a good actor, John Ringham, it allows the scenes where the 2-handed scenes between him and Jack and Barbara bring out the absolute best in Jackie Hill.
I think they bring the best in both of them, don't they?
Yeah,
it crackles.
I love the scene where she admits that she is not a god because he's the only one there and he can't prove it to anyone else. So she, from a position of weakness, she has the upper hand on him, but she's also doing the crew as she speaks. It's kind of a chess stalemate number 2, which is the gunfighters.
I am genuinely shocked. I didn't think this would be number 2. I thought it would be 1 point.
I'm looking at the results, and it's number 2 by 1 point. Something else beats it by 1. You know I love the gunfighters.
We have talked about it. It's one of the constant threads of our friendship here. Is it'll always come back to the gunfighters, and we will always rhapsodize about how great it is.
And it's not just it's got so many funny lines, which it does, but it's got so many great sort of character interactions. Like William Hartnell's look of horror when he realizes that he's surrounded by the Clantons because he knows exactly who they are, and the fact that any time Stephen tries to spin the gun to show off in the Wild West, Peter Purvis has it so the gun always ends facing him because he's being a goof. Then I'm quite fond of the way they reveal that Dodo isn't actually a trained pianist. It is, in fact, an Old West player piano when they pick the ballad, and Stephen goes, let's hope the piano knows it." That's such a great fourth wall breaking line.
And God bless poor Charlie as well.
Yes. Oh, David Graham. Oh, what a hero he is. But I mean, I know you're of the view that it suddenly changes all in episode 4, but I am of the view that Johnny Ringo appears and he slowly corrupts all of this atmosphere into his line of death.
I like that take.
As soon as he appears, the first thing he does is torture the poor old comic relief and kills him.
Maybe push that a little hard.
But I think what makes it is Anthony Jacobs' Doc Holliday because he's just sublime. And there's a bit early on where you can kind of sense this slight hostility in William Hartnell, as if he's been upstaged with his own damn show. But then, whenever he's faced with a great actor, he then raises his own game because he's like, "No, I'm not getting upstaged here." And the two of them are just magic together. I really like the scene where the doctor is getting his tooth out and he's offered the get the gin. And he's like, "No, I don't drink. Luckily, I do." um, and obviously, we've mentioned the scenes with the Doc and Dodo. But I think what cements it as a great performance is in episode 4 when he returns to Tombstone to be at the doctor and Wyatt Earp's side, and he hears that Johnny Ringo's in town, and suddenly his face just completely changes, and he drops all of the amiability completely and becomes this cold, hard killer. And you realize that all of his japes and like it's a complete Columbo act.
Beautiful. So obviously, when we're talking to gunfighters, the one thing I have to ask you about: where do you stand on the Ballad of the Last Chance Saloon?
I'm quite fond of it.
I'm with you.
I mean, it starts strange and then it can go into overkill, but then when it gets to some lines like he's gone kind of heavy from like from Earth's heavy blow. It's curtain for Charlie.
Yes,
it crosses the line twice back into being fun and
it's a commentary on the story. It's it's an extra. It's so well done to me, and I understand why many people don't like it. But Linda Barron's perfect for it. It's part of the genre. They're using part of the genre. They're not using the straight western. Just because this isn't a Sergio Leone part 2.
Yes.
It's part of the musical cowboy genre. A cleverer and more patient listeners will have worked out what your number 1 is.
Yes, it's the grimmest story ever told. Number 1 is The Massacre.
The Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, as it was also known.
Yes, but I'm calling it by the title that it's on the.
It's on the front of the Black Archive of data. It's good enough for them. It's good enough, frankly, and it saves our breath.
And I am convinced that this is very well directed because it's by Paddy Russell, and we've seen enough of her other work to know what she was good at, which was casting and good visual ideas. So this probably looked incredible. Unfortunately, we don't even have the bloody pictures.
we just have a couple of publicity shots.
Promotional, yes. Of course, this was her first one, her first Doctor Who, because she had worked with Cartier,
Yes,
Quatermass.
quite mass.
Um, she got sent to him because he would sort out this bullshit young woman, and she turned into scary with the scary production assistant who would roar at him if he got stepped out of line. Um, and she did the director's course because she realised that directors got paid more than actresses in the 60s, only to be rejected as BBC staff. So then she did what I don't think anyone else would have thought of. Paddy Russell, stormed into Sidney Newman's office and started yelling at him for being out of touch. And this got her a job instantly.
That's because I've recently read the Sidney Newman's autobiography. He liked people who did that kind of thing.
Yes. Apparently, there's the old story there. He heard that two of his directors had gotten a punch up at lunch, and he said, "That's great creative conflict." So the more I know, the those are what's hitting you, but I think that storming into his office and yelling in his face is the best possible way to get a job.
I think the thing I've always heard about the massacre is the actual massacre itself was shown by the use of a woodcut, if I'm not mistaken.
I have heard this. It would be interesting to see how it worked, but again, I mean, it's incredible how this has got so far based on audio, but then you have to do that. This is a very crisp audio of some of the greatest actors working at the time, doing a very grim historical in which the Doctor Who characters. The whole point is that because the Doctor's out of action, Stephen hasn't a clue what's going on, so he is the audience identifying figure because most of the audience probably didn't have a clue what was going on because it's not a covered part of history.
I believe, again, the thing I did with Black Ark, it was based on, or it was influenced by, I think there'd been a film somewhere in the 5 or 10 years beforehand. And I watched, because I was having a silent film session because I realised my knowledge of it was appalling. I went back to D.W. Griffith's follow-up to the very racist Birth of a Nation, Tolerance.
Intolerance,
and
yes.
There's a whole storyline of that based on the massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve. I was like, what? You can see the style is the same. And the thing I will say is, it's one of the grimmest Doctor Who stories, and we can only hear it on audio, and it's the voice of the Magic Roundabout.
Yes. And he plays a cat. It's so much. Well, so much would be solved sooner if he listened. If him and Stephen got on.
Yes, but I quite like that thing about people not getting on or just not communicating. Is a great plot driver on that.
And also, we have to mention it's got Morel. Quatermass himself playing a religious bigot. And it's ironic what you're saying about why Earp writing history, because a lot of what we know about the court decisions on the massacre came from the real life Tavanis's memoirs, which he wrote 30 years later, in which he claimed he was one of the only just people trying to make everything kinder. So he completely wrote history to make himself seem like the trustworthy person.
Well, the winners write history is. And I think the thing we have to look at here, Hartnell's performance in what we have here, this kind of, I mean, it's 60s TV. The production is horrific. There's no wonder people, fluffed their lines or forgot their lines because the pressure recording was terrible. But Hartnell's performance here, compared to what it's like as a Doctor, I know it's not a great deal of it.
Well, there's no hums or hee-hees, and no, that's all the mannerisms.
It's very, very different, clearly thought out. You can see that a lot of the Doctor's mannerisms are deliberate.
Yeah, and apparently that was the thing on set, that if he got into grumpy Hartnell mode at all, Paddy Russell would cut him down to size by telling him the doctor was showing, and he'd have to get his mind frame because he was playing the Abbot.
See, that's great direction there.
Yes. Oh, she is one of my great unsung heroes of Doctor Who.
Totally, and you just and the stuff they give her is so wildly varied. In Doctor Who.
Can you think of anyone else in the show's history, in Invasion of the Dinosaurs, who would attempt to shoot that scene where the Doctor drives Bessie under the legs of the Diplodocus and actually achieve it?
Achieves it. I'd say her use of CSO is much better. And I love Barry Letts. I don't think he's the best director in the world comparatively. He does not work the CSO half as well as Paddy Russell does. And Paddy Russell was not an expert with those techniques.
Although I do so wish to have been a fly in the wall when she saw the models she had to use for 6 weeks. So the massacre it comes across as he tragically, in which again Stephen tries to inadvertently change history, but he can't, because horrific things will still go on and still go on today. I mean, for the massacre, just see what happens in Ukraine. History repeats. It's all about sectarianism, and I live in Glasgow. Sectarianism is not a historical matter.
And I've lived in Northern Ireland. I know
yes.
it well.
It's it teaches you about history, but it's also telling you something about the way we all are now, and people still haven't learned some of the lessons that it wanted to teach us. And so it's drama, it's unsurpassed.
And the thing is, even though he's barely in it as the Doctor, you have that monologue of the Doctor, and where Stephen questions his methods.
Oh,
and Hartnell's monologue after it is, it's quite possibly his finest 5 minutes or so as the Doctor.
Yes, and I so wish that existed, because it's such a great one where he goes through all his companions, and maybe he should return home, but he can't, and his voice breaks, and how this was one of the last long speeches they gave Hartnell, because he was getting he had his arterial sclerosis, and his mind wasn't picking up the lines as well as it used to at that point. Although obviously his performances were still great the rest of that year, but he was convinced by the director and the producer what an important character position this line was, and he really liked it, and he worked his socks off to get it, and I wish we had it because it sounds great.
Yeah, I know it's like the Feast of Stephen, just because if it could come back, anything could come back.
Hmm.
But that is probably that was probably the episode of Hartnell I most want to see, purely because of the monologue.
It is one of my top most wanted episodes to return, along with Fury from the Deep Part 3 for the cliffhanger, and obviously both missing episodes of the Moon Base, because I am me. We didn't mention Michael Ferguson's, who did some great stuff on the War Machines. Wonderful. That some of the fight stuff, actually, you can see why they brought him back in the Pertwee era. Rex Tucker manages to film the gunfighters. That set looks incredible. You would not think it's indoors.
Just the Hartnell walking down the street shots.
Yes. And Michael Emerson, who did the Ark, well, I can quote, your friend Eddie Robson wrote a book. And in it, he wrote the lines, "Look how dynamic the Ark is. Watch Michael Emerson zoom. Watch him fade in. Watch him blow the budget and never be brought back." I know I don't mention it that much, but God, my eventual review of the Moon Base cannot live up to the hype everyone else has probably built on it. There's Ian Stewart Black, who did the War Machines and the Savages, and The War Machines has more of him in it. I think the Macra Terror later on was the most him story. He was a good friend of Patrick McGowan. I believe he was one of
Yes,
the sounding boards
it's
McGowan bounced off of to make the prisoner.
and you can
Um,
see the themes in the Macra Terror there. That holiday
yes,
camp, evil holiday camp thing.
yes,
Yeah,
and also Ian Stewart Black. He was highly sought after for after dinner speeches because he is known as a very witty raconteur well into his early 80s. He was 82 when he died in the late 90s. So there's quite an interesting character there who wrote three Doctor Who's of varying qualities. And Brian Haley's wrote two Hartnell stories, one of which was Celestial Boymaker, one of which was The Smugglers. But to be fair, I don't know how much of his work actually gets onto the screen, because he seems like he was the most rewritten, recurring writer to appear in Doctor Who.
we'll come to that when we get to See to Death as well. Yes,
Uh,
if I have to go, I think the wider issue thing for me as well is how well William Hartnell kind of translates to audio and to the
yes.
book. It's I mean I think there's a kind of literary quality to a lot of Doctor Who's, because that's of this era, because a lot of it is that source material,
Mhm.
historical, so I think it's easy to get a handle on him for the page for that front. It just, he has, I think it's trip to Hartnell, this Doctor has such a distinctive voice, not without being a narrow portrayal.
Mhm.
He's one of the easiest to capture, and he had infamously the faith that Doctor Who could almost run forever, or
Yes.
20 years, and it's gone even longer. Even he was surprised, I'm sure,
Uh,
by the fact it was still going.
I mean, we talk about all these great heroes of the Hartnell era, but really, the show's the reason the show lasted so long is because the person they cast as the Doctor was William Hartnell, and
Absolutely.
he made the show. And it doesn't matter if you, when I can um box off actors' flaws as human beings and take the art, and I know a lot of people can't with Hartnell. Fair enough, but even if you can't, all the people you like in the role later on don't have the role if he didn't make it a success. Um, all of us who love Doctor Who, we merry band of geeks, uh, owe so much of our favourite little show to that man. And yeah, I heartily recommend people, if you want to go back and watch in a marathon, um, go do it. You don't have to take as long as I did just to get through three seasons.
Or
Uh,
shorter than.
there are you can binge, you know. But you'll appreciate how the was created and built on its foundations in so much greater detail. And I know that there are many of these stories that we discussed, which I now appreciate are better than I did for many years before as a fan.
And I would maybe say, why don't you top it off with an adventure in space and time, which would be absolutely perfect.
What leaves me now is to say thank you to my colleague, Mr. Jon Arnold,
Thank you.
writer of many Black archive books.
Well,
Well, Rose, Evaded Dinosaurs, a
Scream of the Shalka
Alka,
and the 11th Hour.
whatever. And he also wrote a book on Euro 2016 for Archive Books. And he's in Sea Terrors, great book you should buy. I'm in it. And he's like a regular contributor to many anthologies. More should be on the way at some point, I say.
I
Um,
think we will. I'll have a word with the publisher. I might know.
yeah, I hear he's a grumpy sod.
Yeah, I love those. I love the
Oh,
grumpy sort.
well, on that note, bye everyone. Oh, and the recording in progress voice sounds like the Cam 10 seconds to nuclear meltdown from that Simpsons episode.